and welcome to Loud and Proud Mamas. I'm your host, Justine, and we are doing something different today. We have a guest joining us in the studio today. Her name is Bethany Lee, and she is representing an organization called Protect Our Water Source. Bethany is a fellow mother. She is very charming and very funny, and we had a great time talking about the Hinchinbrook water bottling project and more generally about how we share access to water and who gets to lay a claim to it. So for this week's episode, my dear beloved listeners, I invite you to pour yourself a glass of tap water and enjoy our conversation about motherhood, community, and protecting our water sources. Enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us, Bethany. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well, and I'm just so thankful that you're giving me the opportunity to talk about what we're doing with Protect Our Water Source.
So we have Bethany Lee here on Loud and Proud Mamas tonight. You're here representing Protect Our Water Source. Could you introduce yourself a little bit? Who are you and who are you representing here today?
Right, so I'm Bethany Lee and relatively new to this area. My husband and my daughter and I, we found a place in Powerscourt that we just fell in love with in 2021. So we bought it and we have been enjoying living out there in this very peaceful little hamlet of Powerscourt, about 10 minutes from Huntingdon. Who am I representing? Mainly the neighbors and friends that we've come to meet through that community. And I just have to say that Powerscourt is a really quiet place, but it is kind of relatively well populated. Like there are quite a few houses on that road. Even if it feels like it's this bucolic setting, there's actually quite a bit of community there. Like you're constantly seeing people passing by, walking their dog, the kind of thing where somebody will actually slow down and stop their car to say hello to you. And it's just so precious and special being somebody who's from the city. That doesn't really happen, but out here it does. And I just love that you have the peace of the countryside, but also this real sort of feeling of people have your backs and you've got their backs too. I love that.
I do love that. I feel very similar to where I am located as well. I'm also from the city. Originally, I'm from Calgary. So this has been a big change. But yeah, I feel the same way that it's a very tight-knit community here. And I also feel like I've been really embraced and I've embraced back in this community.
It's wonderful.
So you're relatively new to the area. How long have you been in Powerscourt?
We bought our place in 2021. We actually split our time still between the city and here with the goal to eventually move here full time. You know, my daughter is almost 13, so there's a tie as well in that community with school and school friends and all of this. So we didn't feel like we needed to uproot everything right away. So we rent in the city. We're lucky to have a very low rent where we are because we've been there forever. And then we were able to buy this house out here and it's been wonderful. So
living the dream.
It's very privileged for sure. I'm fully aware of how, very lucky to sort of have both worlds. But I have to say I do prefer this world.
Me too. I've lived in Calgary, I've lived in Toronto, and I've lived in Montreal. And this town that I'm in now is my favorite place to live. So I'm glad that you really like being here in Powerscourt. Could you tell me a little bit about what we would call the Southwest Quebec Chateauguay Valley? What kind of is this area for someone who's not familiar with it? You know, what's around here mostly?
Right. So I think if you're driving through here, what you'll mainly notice is it's very, very agricultural. There are small towns with some charm. There are tiny little hamlets like Powerscourt, but mainly it's farms, right? And a lot of people doing kind of, I'd say, in between the large-scale industrial type farms that you might see more towards Hemmingford, which is here it's more mid-sized farms, I'd say. They're not tiny small holdings, but there are some of those as well. There's actually quite a vibrant community of organic farmers in this region, some of whom I've been able to volunteer with or to even work with. I worked with at a farm called Les Jardins d'Anneau for 3 summers in a row, just part-time, and it taught me a whole lot there. So there are lots and lots of farmers doing lots of amazing things.
We're both new here. From what I understand, it has a very long history of being an agricultural area. Is that what you found as well? That this is almost considered a bit of a breadbasket here in Quebec?
Absolutely, and it makes all the sense in the world because it's, Quebec is quite a northern area in terms of the world, and this is the very west tip of it in terms of the province. And we have the warmest temperatures and the longest growing season, but also we're in the St. Lawrence River Valley. So that means that we have this pretty fertile land comparatively. Back to the history of this area, there's actually a really interesting book by Mr. Sellers. I think it was Eugene Sellers. He was I think he's the founder of The Gleaner, which is our local paper.
Yes.
I could be getting this somewhat wrong, but he had something to do with The Gleaner, and he wrote a book of history on the area. But this was written back in, I think, the 1800s or early 1900s. And he talks about how this area was settled by mainly Irish immigrants. So, colonizers, but they were fleeing some pretty bad things, I think, over where they were. He talks about the relationships between the indigenous people who were here when they got here, of course, and the settlers. And it's very interesting. And one thing that I found interesting in terms of the land itself was that clearing it was a real headache because it was actually such a wetland.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and of course, there was much more forest as well. So like anywhere that settlers would go, it was the same problem, right? If you wanted to set up a farm, you had to clear the land and prepare it. But they had a real hard time with this land. Now it's become this what we call heritage farmland. And it's quite well protected, I would say, by government bodies like the Commission for the Protection of Agricultural Territory, the CPTAQ, in Quebec. And I think there's a lot of pride here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, just so listeners are aware, I'm from Alberta, so we don't have quite the same culture around eating local food. A lot of our food is shipped in from California, from Mexico, from other parts of the world. So I don't have a lot of background in eating local food. So I came to Montreal a couple years ago and I see all these big signs because the government really wants you to know what's local. And, there's a big sign that says Produits d'ici to let you know at the grocery store, this is from Quebec. I never really paid attention because I don't know what that means. But one day the local carrots were cheaper than the American carrots. Well, a girl loves a deal. So I bought the local carrots. I went home, I tried the carrots, and my brain exploded. I had never had a carrot like that. I had never tasted a carrot that was so distinctly a carrot before. And my mind was just opened. Like I had a chakra unlocked within me where I was like, oh, this is why this is important.
Oh, that's amazing. The carrot chakra.
Yeah, so with this importance and this pride of agriculture and this history of agriculture in this area, it has a relationship to water. For farming, you obviously need water. And so what's the importance of water in this area? Like, what's the relationship to it?
Right. So most of the farmers would probably be on their own wells, right? So they would have wells dug, or they'd have wells already there on their land that they use to pump their water for irrigation. But clearly, I mean, without water, you can't water your crops, and that will become economically very difficult for farmers who suffer from that. And last year, I listened to a podcast by The Gleaner. It was one of their first episodes for this podcast called Farm to Food, I think. And in that podcast, it was, I think about October it was published. They were talking about the really droughty conditions of last summer, and really it was having an impact on farmers of not only food crops or even orchards. We have a lot of apples out here it's just really good conditions for apples generally. They were worried about their trees being able to produce well. And then also you have to think about the livestock, because we also have, sheep and cows and all the rest of it. So farmers were having to think really carefully about how they would keep their animals in the shade and, reduce the need for watering.
So obviously with this area being so agriculture focused and with water being such a central part of agriculture, let's talk about why we're here today, which is to discuss the Hinchinbrook water bottling plant. Could you tell me just what is the bottling plant and, what are your impressions of it?
Right. So there is going to be, it seems, a new venture in Hinchinbrook, which is not exactly a water bottling plant. It's kind of easy to say that it is one because that's, even in documents that I've seen from the company itself, it looks like that's the expedient way to explain what this venture is. But what they're going to be doing is pumping water for sale in bulk to airlines and train companies. So they'll sell that water in bulk, and then that water will be used to fill passengers' cups, right, when it's lunchtime or whatever. They have said as well they might be doing large bottles for, I would imagine, like those things you see, office water cooler type size. So it's not exactly, this was presented to us as one of the good sides about the project, that it wouldn't be contributing quite as much to the plastic pollution aspect of the issue. But it still is something that we are concerned about, and we'll get more into why in a moment. I just want to contextualize this first by saying that in Powerscourt, this tiny hamlet, there is already a water bottling plant, and it's been in existence for several decades and pumping, lots and lots of water this whole time, up to something like 25 million liters a year in recent years, based on recent data that we've been able to dig up. So the rumors that started flying about there possibly being a new venture of the same sort right across the road, they just seemed unbelievable at first. Like, folks just kind of couldn't wrap their heads around why would we put another one right next door when we all know that we've been having several years of really dry, hot summers where people with shallow wells like mine have even experienced dry spells. So that's where the concern started to come in, and we started to ask questions.
Yeah. So we touched a little bit about what the concerns were, with climate change. We have more of a dry, hotter summers. Certain wells, not all of them, but certain wells are running dry. What are the risks of this project? What's concerning you about this?
I'd say that what concerns us is that we don't know enough about the potential risks. And what we've been asking for is access to the studies on which this decision has been made. We are hoping that we will get access to those studies soon, and then that we, who are not hydrogeologists and are not professionals, we will be able to have those studies read over by professional hydrogeologists, maybe one or two independent of anything to do with the company, right? First, we went to the municipality and asked if they could show us any studies like this. And they said, well, no, because the permit to take water is something that's issued by the province of Quebec. So they said, look, you can do your own request for access to information. Anybody can do it. It will probably take time. It's a bureaucratic machine, right? It's not going to come to you overnight. So we did put in that request, I think it was February 9th. Okay. And so we're still waiting. And we've been told that if we don't get a response by April 11th, then we can go to the Commission for Access to Information and continue to pursue that. There is publicly available information on the website of the Commission for the Protection of Agricultural Land in Quebec, the CPTAQ, because the CPTAQ had a part in authorizing this project as well. And that's because initially, back when it was requested to do this project, it was on agricultural land, and it's actually still zoned as an agricultural parcel of land. But so that meant that they had to get a special permission to put in this type of industrial project. That was accorded to them, actually to the former owner of the land. This is now in different hands, but this permission was accorded back initially in 2001, and then they requested an augmentation, to take more water than what was initially requested, and they got that accorded to them in 2003. We want to know, have there been extensive new studies done, or has this just been administrative renewals of the permit?
Seems like a long time between 2003 and listeners, the date we are recording is 2026. April of 2026. So it seems 23 years, if I'm doing the mental math all right.
Your math is mathing, as the kids say.
It seems like a long time between studies. A lot has happened in 26 years, especially, I think everyone has noticed that hotter summers, more heat waves, and as you're mentioning, droughts affecting water supply. So 23 years is a long time to go without, these studies that, we could really base more decision making on.
Right. And I should just clarify that, again, we don't know for sure. We've tried to find out if there have been extensive studies done since then on this specific area. Also taking into account the fact that the current water bottling plant that's already been there for several decades has been pumping from, I'd suppose maybe the same aquifer. Has that been properly measured? I'm told that the Ministry of the Environment in Quebec has really strict rules and guidelines for these types of projects and that they monitor them closely. We hope that's the case.
Right.
We would expect it's the case, but we'd also like to have that be more transparent. That's the main concern. So again, if it's been 23 years since any proper extensive study has been done, then it's time for an update. We reached out to multiple hydrogeologists to ask them that very question. Is it normal practice for a permit to be renewed on the basis of such an old study? And they said, well, no. And here's what you would actually need for, a safe go ahead with a new project like that. So there's a whole list of things that we've put forward in a letter to the promoters of the project and requesting them to take stock of that. And they have publicly said at one of the Hinchinbrook council meetings that they will, also in correspondences that were given to us by the municipality, that they are going to be having their own study issued by hydrogeologists that they are hiring. So hopefully they do that. It should be at their own expense because it's their project, right? Mm-hmm. But some of the people in our group have suggested that the only real viable way of doing this would have our own, hire our own hydrogeologist to do a study. The problem with that is money, of course.
Yeah, so whose expense is that? Is that a municipal expense? Is that a community-funded expense? Is that provincial? Can we get Mark Carney in on this?
I feel like Mark Carney would probably say he has bigger fish to fry, but I think that's a cost that gets bounced around infinitely until somebody just says, hell, I'm gonna do it, right? So our group, Protect Our Water Source, does not, I think, have the capacity to do fundraising, although some would say within the group that we probably should, and they've already said that. So it might be something that we look at in the future, but I'm not sure if we actually will pursue that. The municipality has said that they do not have the funds and that they don't want to pursue their own independent study. The MRC has also said that they don't want to do that for this project. Basically, I have the feeling that, and from what I understand from everything I've been told by our MRC, which is our regional governance of the various townships that make up this larger area called the Haut-Saint-Laurent, and at the municipal level as well in Hinchinbrook, that their hands are tied. Basically, they were caught off guard by this project coming in. The permit was accorded so long ago that people forgot about it, basically. It was back in 2004 that they got their provincial permit at first, after having got the CPTAQ's authorizations for 2001 and then 2003. And then people just forgot about it, and no work was done. They didn't start pumping water at all. So they've just been sitting on the permits and the land. And now it's finally come to, okay, we're going to do something, right? Mm-hmm. Under this new ownership, they're doing something. I think that means that the municipal councillors in Hinchinbrook were kind of caught off guard. Oh, yeah, that land is zoned with this extra allowance to do something. It's too late to change it now, because if they try to change it after the company says we're going to use this permit, then they could get slapped with a lawsuit, right? And even the province, from what I understand, could also be afraid of that. which is pretty surprising, right? Because you think, oh, the Ministry of the Environment must have this amazing power even against companies, because you do see a lot of environmental groups making wins here and there, right? But I think in practice it's actually pretty difficult to to fight to overturn a permit that's been accorded, even if it was a long time ago. Yeah, at least under the laws as they were at the time.
Interesting. So let's just go over the timeline a little bit. So approximately 2001, the permit was first issued, and then 2004, the permit was renewed.
Authorized that agricultural parcel to be used for something other than agricultural, which was for water bottling purposes.
Mm-hmm.
In 2003, the request was made to up the amount, and it was accorded again by the CPTAQ. And then in 2004, they got their ducks in a row, and as in the old owner of the property got his ducks in a row and got his permit to take water. So then that permit to take water, it has to be renewed every 10 years. And what's unclear to us as yet, what we're hoping to get clarity on soon with our request for access to information from the Ministry of the Environment, is what is the extent of what's required, what analyses are done on the site and the surrounding area to do a renewal like that. And if it's basically just checking a few boxes and looking at the old study that's from 23 years ago now, then that doesn't seem to be enough to us. So we're going to have, I think, a stronger argument for at least asking them, the ministry to commission its own study in that case.
Well, there you go. That's who would fall under, who would pay for the study.
Yeah, hopefully.
So when did the project get announced?
When did the project get announced? Well, it didn't get announced.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the issue here.
Interesting.
Is that it's something that you'd think you'd want to announce to your constituents. You'd want to be transparent about what's happening and be proactive as a municipality in letting your residents know that this new player is coming to town, right? But that never happened. It was just because people started noticing that there was increased truck traffic on the road. And then they started noticing, this was back in November of 2025. Then they started noticing that there was clearing trees. They were putting down a sort of large gravel type material. And it looked like something was going to be built there. So then calls started to be made to the municipality. First, all they told us was, we don't know what the actual intentions are. We think it could be a water bottling plant because this land has a water taking permit on it. And that was kind of surprised everybody as well. So then we started looking into who owned the land, what were their connections to, what were they really planning on? And that's when we found out. It was because we were all kind of pretending to be investigative journalists for a while.
You gotta channel your inner Lois Lane.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was kind of deduced that this project was happening. How did Powerscourt respond? How did your neighbors respond?
I think they were outraged. I think that they feel like it happened in the dark of night and that they were sort of dismissed as their opinion wasn't going to matter anyway, so why even try finding out what their opinion was? It feels like there was a total lack of public consultation and that it was like pulling teeth to get information. I mean, that's the feeling that most people have. I feel slightly differently because I became so active in communicating with the municipality directly, and I have to say there are really good folks in that town council who did try to answer questions, and I know that they took a lot of time and care to do their best to sort of reassure us and to also do, I think, their due diligence of seeing if there was anything that they could do to stop it, because the feeling I have is that there were a lot of people on that council who probably didn't want this happening either, because they're farmers. They live here and they didn't want the increased truck traffic either. Because we're talking, this isn't just pure NIMBYism, the truck issue. It's like, this is a really small country road with a lot of potholes. It's really not meant for trucks of that size, these big 18-wheelers. And if you have one coming out of the current plant and then another one coming to the new plant and they're crossing on the road, there's absolutely really nowhere but the ditch for you to go if you're out there walking your dogs. And it's a lot of trucks.
If you want to have a picture painted for you listeners, originally we planned to have this interview recorded at Bethany's place, but one of the reasons we couldn't go is that I can't drive, so typically I was going to cycle. You live completely within a cycling distance for me, but there's no safe shoulder for me to cycle. The country road is so tight, there is not even a shoulder for me to cycle on. I would basically be on the road. The cars next to me have nowhere to maneuver, to go around me. So basically, I would just hold up traffic. Everybody's going 12 kilometers an hour behind me.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know that, Justine. If I'd known, I would have offered to drive you. But yeah, it is dangerous. Yeah, and yet it seems to be that there's no regard for people like you who depend on cycling as your mode of transportation when it comes to these trucks. And it's funny because this area actually is known for being a great cycling area. I mean, it's awesome because it's mostly flat. Mm-hmm. I love.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few like cyclo-tourists, but you do have to be very careful and you do have to be very mindful as a cyclist and as especially as a driver with that in mind, because you're right, it isn't really set up for that. They are just small, narrow country roads.
So you can imagine, having regular traffic, families, workers going up and down on the country roads. Now add in trucks going in back and forth. I'm familiar with that area. The infrastructure is not set up for it. Who's going to pay for the additional infrastructure to support the additional traffic,
Yeah, not the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the taxpayers, right? But once you get past the four corners of Powerscourt and you're on that last section of the road where I live, and many of my neighbors who are the most upset also live there, there is no getting around the fact that it's a tiny road shared by too many trucks at this point already with the current plant, and it's just going to be worse now.
So right now, with the timeline, we're waiting on requests for information. Do I have that technical term right?
You got it. Yeah. Request for access to information.
And then what happens after that date passes?
So if we don't get a response from the ministry, or if the response, say, is not to what we were expecting, as in if they say there was a study done in 2004, but you can't have it, it's covered by commercial secret or something like that. I'm not sure if that they would say that, but if that happened, then we can apparently go to the Commission for the Access to Information. And that would be a step that hopefully we would do with the help of a lawyer from, I'm hoping, the Centre Québécois du droit de l'environnement, which is the Quebec Center for Environmental Law, who we've been in contact with, who we've a meeting with and have communicated back and forth a bit. And also with the support of an organization in Montreal called Eau Secours, which is a great pun, because eau in French is water. But Eau Secours means help. So it's kind of like, I guess to loosely translate it, it would be like SOS water.
That's great. Thank you for helping out our Anglophone listeners here.
Yeah, no worries. So Eau Secours is an amazing water protection group that's been in existence for several decades now, that initially formed to counter efforts in Montreal to privatize their public water systems, like how water would be managed in Montreal was going to become private at one point. So they geared up at that point in time, and they've been actually going strong ever since in protecting the idea of water for the people, not for profit, all over the globe, not just even here in Quebec. So they help us out with advice and such, but really they sort of foster our ability as a smaller local group to fight our own fight.
I love that.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Talked about water for the people. And so I want to kind of focus on that, because what you're talking about, Powerscourt is a community of people. The water is for the people. And I want to talk about, what does water for the people mean?
Well, I think that it's important to note that under Quebec law, water is enshrined as what's called a common good. It belongs to no one, but also everyone. Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes into almost everything that we produce. And so it does play a huge role in our economies, right? So it's, again, is going back to the farmers, like if they don't have enough water, then economically they can't really survive. So it's something that has to be shared really responsibly. And I think what's a shame is when you see that we're going down a path where summers are getting hotter and hotter, that we would renew a permit like this that doesn't seem to be like responding to a necessity of life. Like, is it really necessary to be selling water at a profit?
We're going to screw over the farmers. Not to put up too fine of a point on it, it's uncomfortable as a Canadian right now to be very reliant on global markets for food. Like the fact that we do have access to local agriculture, local produce, local meat, water plays a role in all of that.
So it's really good to like zoom out sometimes like that, and especially with what's going on in the world right now. And like people are going to be feeling that more and more if this continues to go on the way it is. And of course, we're talking about all the wars and and our neighbors to the south. But in terms of people over profit, it's the age-old fight, right? In terms of this little tiny version of that age-old fight, like the promoters of this water bottling company are saying, well, we're going to be taking from an aquifer that's 70 meters deep. It's deeper than all of the farmers' wells around it. They're more in the surface. Same with the residents. They all have more surface wells. Now, our argument is, look, you're still taking. The question is, are we taking more than we are able to recharge naturally over time? There's our watershed organization called the Scabrique, which looks at the Chateauguay Valley watershed region. Basically, the government of Quebec, it looks at managing its water via these watershed organizations that it creates. Every 10 years, these watershed organizations have to come up with what they call a water master plan. Mm-hmm. And in the most recent one from our particular watershed organization, for 2024 to 2034, they talk about one of the biggest concerns being an overconsumption of groundwater. Okay. That we're already in a state where we're consuming more than is naturally recharged. So in that context, at the watershed level, which I'll concede that's a very large area with, it's not only the Haut-Saint-Laurent, so all these townships that make up our regional area, but also a few other ones going up towards Montreal. So it's a large area, but at that level, we're experiencing problems already. We have areas where we have to have water trucked in for a variety of different reasons. Like, why are we permitting something that's not necessary for life in that context? Even if in our little neck of the woods in Powerscourt, there's an abundance of this deep spring water, and it's actually not being used right now because all of the surrounding wells are more shallow. Well, if we keep experiencing all this drought and those shallow wells start drying up, then it would be nice to be able to count on what's deeper there for the future.
And let's talk about the future. The podcast is called Loud and Proud Mamas. I'm a recent mama, 15 months old. You've told me you have a kiddo as well?
I do. She's almost 13.
So she's starting to get big then?
Yeah, she's actually slightly taller than I am now. Yeah.
I remember the day that I realized I was taller than my mom. I never got taller than my dad, but it mattered to me that I was taller than my mom.
How did that feel?
It felt like such an achievement, but I can't really explain what I had achieved. Like, it wasn't like a skill that I worked on. It wasn't a test that I studied for. It was just one day I realized I had grown taller than my mother, and I was just so pleased.
That's really beautiful.
So we're both mamas. I think we always think about what the future is like for our kids. We want to set them up for the best life possible. Part of that future includes water. We don't want to leave them in a world that has a water scarcity. It's something I worry about. What resources are going to be more challenging to get for my son in the future?
That is such a deep part of why I got involved in doing this stuff. It's something that does kind of keep me up at night too, thinking about the future of our planet. I think that in Quebec here, we definitely are in a very good position in terms of having quite a lot of the world's fresh water that's accessible here. But that is not a reason to fritter it away. It's actually a reason to really preserve it And not just for us, but for others as well, right? Yeah. I'm not talking about greedily sitting on a hoard of excellent water like some dragon guarding its gold. I'm talking about being really responsible stewards and leading the way for the world. Because look, the reason why we have a water scarcity issue isn't because there's less water in the world than there used to be. There's still the same amount as the beginning of time of this planet. It's always the same amount of water. 100%, it hasn't changed. It's about what's accessible, what's, quality, and it's about keeping the water that we have in our watershed and not letting it be taken out of that watershed and distributed elsewhere. And there are governments around the world that have done a really poor job of taking care of their water resources, like in Chile. It's really interesting when the president of Chile, I think it was in the 80s or 90s, decided to basically make water a financial commodity. It was so fast how quickly the corporations gobbled that up, and now they deal with such scarcity, and it's always the most vulnerable who are the most affected.
What do you picture Powerscourt in, let's zoom out 15, 20 years? Let's assume the bottling plant goes forward within the expectations that they're laying forth, drilling into the deep aquifer, selling the water for capital use. What do you zoom out 15, 20 years? What do you think your community looks like?
I kind of think that it might not look very much different than it does today. I think that's too short term. I think that if you're talking 50 years from now, it might become a real conflict. I'm glad that these permits for taking water are limited to 10-year periods. They go up for renewal. Like the next time this permit goes up for renewal in 2035, if I'm still alive, I'll probably be there, watching and putting in my comments when there's a public consultation. There's a month when the government is like, if you have anything to say, it's like at the end of, just before the priest says,
forever hold your peace.
Yeah, exactly. Forever hold your peace. The citizens are allowed to do that. There's a 30-day period where you can come in and make your arguments known.
So could you tell me a little bit about what you would picture a future where Powerscourt does have water scarcity? What are the sort of decisions you, your neighbors, your larger community, what sort of decisions do you guys have to make?
Well, I think back to last summer, and you heard things like in Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, which is a municipality on the way up to Montreal. If you go the scenic route, it had to put in place water restrictions, right? So people couldn't, water their lawns or whatever. I'm sure if you had a swimming pool, there might be restrictions about that. It's going to be things like that. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think that it's important that everybody does try to cut back on their unnecessary water uses. Don't water your driveway just to make it look good. Just sweep it. There are things that we can all do better, I think, especially in a country like Canada, where we have this sentiment of overabundance, and there are people in the world who make do with so much less, so much less. The statistics are super alarming, actually, about how, especially Quebecers, we do tend to use way too much water. So I think that it would just mean, honestly, making some changes that we should already be making. But I think, too, that one aspect of this that I need to learn more about, and I'm very curious about, is how would that affect the ecosystem? If we're having groundwater, that water that's invisible but underneath us everywhere, there's water under our feet, right, in the ground. That groundwater forms the base debit, the source of our rivers and our lakes, right? And so what would our river look like? Would it be a trickling stream? What would the fish do? What would the frogs do? What would happen to the whole food chain and the whole ecosystem?
Migrating birds. We have a huge Canadian goose population in this area. I've never seen anything like it. During migration periods, they just come in huge numbers and you can hear them from kilometers around.
Oh man, they're so loud right now. It's like piped down, but they're also so beautiful.
They are. They are. So what's Protect Our Water Source? What is the organization itself hoping to do?
I think first of all, to educate ourselves more about water issues. We're trying to make sure that our politicians at the local level know about these issues as well and hold them to account to make sure that they put in place protections for water that are really, really strong. After all this happened and it kind of washed out that it looks like they got caught off guard in Hinchinbrook, the council decided to draft a bylaw to prevent any further water bottling plants from coming in. That they'll vote on this month. So I'm hoping it passes. That would be great. And so we've taken that idea as well to the MRC level, the regional level. And we've written to all the mayors in the area, asking them to make sure that they take that zoning very seriously, that they look at their maps, they see, oh, are there any loopholes here? Can we close them to any sort of commercial water taking project that does not need to come in here? And also, we would love it if our MRC and also our municipality and all the municipalities in the world would join what's called the Blue Communities Project, which is initially it was a Council of Canadians project, and then it still is, but it's spearheaded in Quebec by Powerscourt, back to them. And basically what it is municipalities make promises to ban the sale of bottled water in municipal buildings and events, to protect their water management companies that are public from privatization, and to recognize water as a human right. So kind of symbolic, but also actionable steps. And when you think about it, like banning the sale of bottled water, it means that the municipality has to provide other ways of getting water to folks, which will encourage better practices like water fountains. And a lot of people don't know is your bottled water is actually so much more likely to be contaminated by the microplastics and all this stuff than the water you get out of the tap. It's such a false conception that bottled water is superior. It's just branding and you're paying so much more for it. It's a scam.
Yeah. Do you have any personal goals with your project?
I think that this whole thing has taught me a ton about how the world works. It's resolved my goal, I guess, to be an influence of light and to always act in respect of nature and to stand up for nature and for humanity. That sounds very lofty. I guess my goal is to remain engaged. It might not be this particular fight. At a certain point, there will be a clear resolution to this, but that doesn't mean that the work stops. There will still be things to do. And I think it took this issue coming to my door to make me into, dare I say, a bit of an activist. And now that fire's lit, I can't really stop knowing what I know.
Very much like being a mother, there's always more work to be done.
Absolutely. And they're so interlinked. And so many amazing activists are also mothers. And I think they're activists because they're mothers, because they care. You care about the future. You care about future generations. You can't just say, oh, well, it doesn't affect me. Because you love. There's so much. It's motivated by love, right?
There is something interesting about motherhood that really connects you to your community, not only to your children, but to your own mother, to other mothers in your community. I have found in my own personal experience that I've really widened my own network as I've entered into motherhood.
That's so beautiful to hear, because I think when it goes the other way, because people do talk about, a lot of mothers do talk about their world sort of getting smaller and then them feeling isolated when they go into motherhood. And I think that's so, so sad.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad to hear that that's not been your experience. In fact, the very opposite.
Yeah, this community is really great. We have an organization called the CRF, the Center for Family Resources, and it's actually where I met my co-host, Laura, who is also a recent mother. And from there, we founded this podcast, and from here, we met you. So it's just mothers all the way down.
And then you're going to come to the garden club and meet
Yes,
more
yes.
mamas.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and even maybe not necessarily mamas with human child, but mamas with plant children.
Oh, you'll especially be meeting those. And a few dadas as well.
Gotta love the dads. So, wrapping up here, you have any final thoughts you want to share?
I just want to say I'm really grateful to you for making this space to talk about this I feel like it's been a wild ride of a conversation, and I hope that you don't have too much trouble editing all the bloopers out.
I'm a champion editor. I get in the zone.
You're awesome.
Thank you so much for being here, Bethany, on Loud and Proud Mamas. If people want to check you out, your website is protectourwatersource.ca.
It sure is.
All right. Thanks so much for being here on the podcast.